or that doesn't?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I can see both of us. Anyhow, at this moment, we are now live, and I see that the people who are already logged in, all right, now they see you. Now they see me. It's oh, maybe it's set to who is ever talking, and there's a delay. I think there may be. Well, I don't know what can be done. All right, it's time to start the clock. Let's do that. And there.
The countdown has begun.
Yep. The countdown has begun. There are already lots of people logging in and sending messages, and can you see only me now? What do you see on your screen? Do you see both of us?
No, I have the little sort of corner image of you, and mostly the screen is the countdown.
All right. Well, I mean, as far as I can see on my end, everything is working.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't need to see me. No big loss.
Okay. So we'll just, what happens, because we start the countdown clock 10 minutes early, that sends a notification out to the subscribers. So tens of thousands of people will now receive a little email that shows that we are live, and that gives them a little time to log in.
Excellent. I like that.
I designed this animation.
It's beautiful. I'm a big fan. I've always felt that the whole key is to reside right where the yin and yang meet, right in the center point, that line that curves right there. The key is to be that line.
And the way this has been designed, if it works the way I intended, which it doesn't always because it's a little tricky, but the right at the center point, you should always have two complementary colors. In fact, all along the S curve.
Yes, perfect.
Although sometimes they're not exactly complementary, but I created this animation, 15 years ago or so. It could be updated.
When you first did Thinking Aloud, was this the symbol or the icon?
No. The original PBS series the icon was it was like a vase with two silhouettes. So it was an image that you could see two people talking to each other, or you could see a vase.
Okay. And that was roughly what, about 1985, 86, something like that?
Right, 86.
Yeah, I remember. I was in high school.
Even before that, I started doing interviews on the radio in 1972. Really? Yeah.
Oh. I was reborn in 1971. Jeff, was there something that particularly piqued your interest when you were younger about wanting to, say, talk to people that are, kind of pushing the boundaries on things?
Not really. I was in my 20s when my interest really blossomed in this area. I think before that, I didn't give it much thought.
As a little kid, I was obsessed with the metaphysical,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like it wasn't the right time, and then it was almost sort of just put on the back burner,
Uh-huh.
and then and I think we talked about this at 24. I had a profound meditation that kind of changed everything for me. All of a sudden, everything made sense about why I felt the way I felt and things like that. But as a little kid, that was the only thing I was really interested in.
No kidding.
Yeah, metaphysics. I had, other than I guess like baseball, because my dad was a big baseball fan.
Uh-huh.
Those two things, that was about it: metaphysics and baseball.
I loved baseball as a kid. I built a crystal radio, and I could listen to all the baseball games on my crystal radio. And I did have a fascination with UFOs going back to about the age of 10. I even wrote a letter to a fellow named Donald Menzel, who had written a book about UFOs. He was a Harvard professor of astronomy, really quite skeptical. But I guess as a 10-year-old, I didn't appreciate how skeptical he was. So I wrote him a letter, and he actually wrote back to me.
Yeah, I could see why. UFOs are, well, the whole denial of UFOs is maybe even what piques people's interest even more, is because it keeps being denied. And it's like, well, millions and millions of people are hallucinating the exact same thing over and over and over again. Not likely.
Think of all the conspiracy theories that have stemmed from that.
Yeah, I think they should start calling them spoiler alerts instead of conspiracy theories, because so many of them are quite accurate.
Yeah. So I imagine you've got some water or tea or something handy.
Yes, I do. I have some water, and I also have some pineapple juice as well.
Okay, good.
And Jeff, did you say at 10:30 we wanted to have a sort of a private chat with your volunteers as well?
After we finish the live stream itself.
Yes, I do. I have some water, and I also have some pineapple juice as well.
Okay, good. Oh dear. Hold on. What's going on here? There. I see what I did. Okay, at this point in time, we have over 200 people on.
Fantastic.
And it'll get up to over 1,000.
Well, lots of different time zones, I'm sure, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I need to do is, and I've got this all set. Okay, so we have less than 2 minutes and we'll start. There is a little bit of a delay. I think it's about 20 seconds. Not that it matters, because if you're not watching the other screen, you won't notice the difference at all.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I have a very interesting story I could tell you about.
Okay.
About UFOs.
So we'll go for 90 minutes, and then after that, I'll invite the volunteers. There are about 3 or 4 volunteers today who help. Without their help, it would be very difficult to do this, because the chat window where all the questions are coming in flows by really fast.
Yeah, I've seen that. I wouldn't. It's way too distracting.
So that's why 4 people that are, intercepting the best questions and putting them on a separate document that I have here.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for doing that. I appreciate that.
Okay, just a few seconds to go. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Jeffrey Mishlev. I'm here with RJ Spina, who is the author of Supercharged Self-Healing. We'll be taking your questions in just a few minutes. For now, I thought it would be good to sort of recapitulate some of the things we talked about in our very first interview, RJ. There are people who are asking questions about it already. So I know, and I've seen it's on your website, all sorts of documentation regarding the illnesses that you were confronted with, if I remember rightly, in 2016 is when these events happened. So let's just review that story briefly.
Sure. Yeah. It was either March 1st or March 2nd of 2016. I had been feeling quite ill for a couple of months, very, very run down, foggy in the head, lack of energy, couldn't follow through on my determination and intention. And I remember at one point, I actually couldn't meditate because I was so foggy mentally. And I remember that was when my partner at the time was like, we have to get you into the hospital. Something's really wrong. So I went to the ER on March 2nd. I believe it was either the 1st or the 2nd. And I was diagnosed with sepsis, septic shock. I was told I probably wouldn't live another 48 hours. I was also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's autoimmune disease, hypothyroidism, and I was given very strong antibiotics, very strong, for the sepsis, for the septic shock. They actually had to put something in my arm. It was almost like a stent because the antibiotics were so strong. So I was there in the hospital for about 12 or 13 days. And then I was released. And the major instruction was all these medications for type 1 diabetes and hypothyroidism. They couldn't do anything about Hashimoto's. In fact, that's what they said. They said, we don't treat that. But the main thing was the antibiotics to take care of the sepsis. Now, what ended up happening is that I guess it was about six and a half or 7 weeks later, the antibiotics clearly were not working because I literally became permanently paralyzed from the chest down. I was rushed to the hospital, obviously, for emergency life-saving surgery where they did a laminectomy, which is where they scrape off the infection. I had a very unusual, I was told there was only 45 cases of it's in the book, Staphylococcus aureus abscess. And you can see the MRI of my spine, and you can see the surgeon's notes as well, pre and post, about complete paraplegia. And so they performed that surgery. I woke up maybe around 3 a.m. that morning after the neurosurgeon, Dr. Qureshi, performed it. And as I've said before, when I woke up, the veil of whatever was keeping me from the remembering of healing had been completely removed. Everything was available to me. It's like I described it as RJ 2.0. I had access to everything again. And that's when I started describing what I would do, the mechanics, the metaphysics of healing, that I would walk in exactly 100 days, and so on. And that the next day, the neurosurgeon came in, and that's when he told me, my partner at the time, and the infectious disease doctor, who had been working with me since March 1st when I had sepsis, he said that my condition was permanent, the paralysis, that no one gets, but you can't get better once the spine is damaged. And there was no activity, no sensation, no nothing for about 17 days. And then all of a sudden the healing was not linear. it was totally quantum by applying all those things that I had remembered to do.
So, and you used a meditative process. I know one of our viewers has pointed out that there are cases of paraplegia that are temporary, and there are other cases that are permanent. So it is known that if the spine isn't damaged to a certain degree, people do occasionally recover.
Yeah, honestly, I had no idea about that. I was told the next morning that my condition was permanent. The MRI shows the spine is completely crushed. And my understanding is that once the spine is damaged to that degree, it doesn't repair itself. There's no self-healing or self-repair mechanism for the spine. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I can vividly recall too is that the neurosurgeon would come in every day. Once I was out of the ICU, I was in the ICU for, I guess, 3 days. And then once I was in the hospital, he would come in every day, so I can remember him and his two assistants. And he would touch my toes. And, he would say, RJ, can you feel that? No, can't feel it. And he stopped coming by after 6 or 7 days and asking if I could feel that, can I wiggle my toe? Can I feel that? And I asked one of the nurses, so how come, he stopped coming by? And she actually said, if there isn't some sort of immediate sensation, the chances of anything coming back are literally zero. And he told me that from the beginning. And I think he was almost just confirming it. And I was reading his thoughts anyway, that he's like, this guy is not going to be getting any better, which he told me the day after the surgery.
Yeah. So all the prognosis was about as bad as it could be. And now that I think about it, if you're paralyzed from the chest down, that means you don't have any conscious control over your bowel movements.
Nothing. I mean, there was nothing. I had no control, had no idea. I couldn't even tell if I had to go to the bathroom. I couldn't even tell if my bladder was full or if I had to move my bowels. There was no sensation, no functionality, absolutely nothing, which makes for some interesting circumstances. You have no idea that you do have to go to the bathroom or your body has to go to the bathroom. So I learned all about that too.
Now, people watching us at this moment, they're looking at you from the chest up. So they can't necessarily see your video where you're out walking about. What's your health like right at this moment?
Yeah, it's totally fine. I go for walks. I go in the pool. There's no real limitation in terms of the injury that I had. In terms of my paralysis, I like to say it is a complete and full recovery, which I predicted in the ICU even before the neurosurgeon said that you can't recover. The other issues that I have, I don't take medications for anything, but I like to say that I've resolved those issues because I use what I call eternal discipline. So if I ate poorly or did things that didn't coincide with what I need to do to maintain a certain level of health, I'm quite sure my blood sugar would get out of whack. My thyroid would start to act up. My hypothyroidism would start to come back, the Hashimoto's, all that. But I maintain a focus. And like I say, I like to call it eternal discipline. So I say that I have resolved those issues because I don't take any medication. All my blood work looks great, fantastic. And I would say I have healed my so-called permanent paralysis because I have no paralysis whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. And as a result of healing yourself, you have now developed a protocol that other people can use.
Yeah, the Ascend the Frequencies healing technique, which is really what that book is about, are the 7 different things that I did with myself repeatedly to sort of bring, you could just say to bring back the life force throughout my system. It's things that it's more like a muscle memory in terms of the protocols. But yes, there are 7 different exercises or protocols that are in the book. And these are the same things that I've taught countless people to do for themselves. And I assist them and they've gotten remarkable results as well. I like to say, Jeffrey, that if you have a different understanding and you apply different exercises or protocols, you get different results.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, given that overview, people can see both of us now. Given that overview, I have questions already coming in, and so I'll start to share with you some of the questions coming in from our viewers. Megan, who is also one of the moderators, noticed that when we did our first program, I think it was released about a month ago, one of the commenters then said, your teachings seem the same as many other people, and they mentioned Deepak Chopra as an example. So she's asking, how would you describe the difference in what you are offering us? That is, what is unique about how you teach and what you've learned from your experience?
Well, I'm not particularly familiar with other people's work, to be honest, so it would be hard for me to compare. The only thing I can say is that I've done this tangibly with myself through a higher state of consciousness, through authentic self-realization. My understanding is that this is the most advanced and holistic form of self-healing that is available anywhere. It applies meditations and a higher consciousness perspective, as well as a true understanding of metaphysics from a tangible perspective, as opposed to a maybe research perspective or an intellectual perspective. So this is actual tangible. My body was literally completely destroyed. I was permanently paralyzed, so-called permanently paralyzed from the chest down, riddled with septic shock and multiple diseases. And through my own authentic self-realization and my own ability in terms of clairsentience, claircognizance, clairvoyance, which I've had since forever, but certainly even as a child as RJ, it's a totally different understanding, really, of everything. And I would say one of the main things that makes it different is that I've done it. It's not a story. It's not medical fiction. It's not a spiritual canard. This is something that can be done, and I've done it, which is why I recorded everything. I provided medical documentation. The intellect wants to compare all the time. And I think it actually does a disservice to everybody's work. There's great things to be garnered, I'm sure, from all these other people that talk about healing modalities. All I can say for myself is that I've actually done it. And so it's not theory.
Mm-hmm. And as far as I can tell, really the approach that you take is consistent with what I would call the perennial philosophy.
Yeah, I don't. So, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
No, well, I'm just going to say that if some of the things that you're sharing with people seem familiar, it's because they've been taught for thousands of years in different cultures.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, what I feel has happened in this incarnation is that I've simply taken things that have been there, and I think I've added to it. Because like I said, I've done this. I've literally put myself back together. But the basic understandings, or the basic, you could say, philosophy behind it is probably quite consistent with lots of teachings that have gone on for a very long time. But now we can say that some of these things that I've discovered simply add to that, and we're taking it to the next level. And that next level is this authentic higher conscious understanding, as well as the tangible proof that this was actually done.
Okay, now Brian Smith has a lot of questions. Brian has sort of expressed himself as a skeptic, and he's concerned about New Age nonsense. And so he wants to know, for example, is there documentation available that he could look at regarding the illnesses and the diagnoses that you had? I'm pretty sure a lot of it's on your website.
Yeah, it is. And people can be skeptics all they like. I didn't heal myself through skepticism. I didn't heal myself through doubting myself. And frankly, it doesn't matter to me what people think or believe. I know exactly what I've done. I've documented it all. I don't have anything to prove to anybody ever, and I never have. So it's 100%, 100% accurate. It's 100% legitimate. There's videos of me unparalyzing myself. There's copies of, there's MRI of my spine. I don't care if people want to doubt what I've done. That's their own limitation. Makes no difference to me. I have nothing to prove to anyone.
Okay, here's a question from Rob Hooks 9. And he asks if you were always a spiritual person, or did you become a spiritual person at a certain point in time?
No, Rob, as a kid, I used to, and I think we spoke about this, Jeff, on
Yeah.
our first interview. As a kid, I would leave my body. I knew as a child that I was pure spirit. I had no identification with being human with the body. I never felt like, I still don't, never felt like I was human. So yeah, I came into this incarnation, you could say, with a direct connection to what I really am. And I think that sort of expressed itself through my natural sort of inclination to leave my body, to what we call astral project, to be able to experience different frequencies, different dimensions, and to actually explore these different frequencies and different dimensions. So no, I'm, if we could call that spiritual if you like, but for sure I came into the world that way. And my understanding is that I am always this way, so to speak.
Okay. Well, I think at least that's very different than my background. I can't claim, I think of myself as pretty passionate about spirituality and consciousness these days, but I wasn't always that way. Here's a question from Rob Lim. He says, why does it seem to be that a lot of limitations in self-healing, like changing your DNA, changing your skeletal formation, and so on, what would be the jump to make these changes easily possible? Does that make sense to you?
I think so. Okay, so DNA is really nothing. Okay, so we really have to understand the energetic templates, which are really the building blocks of form and function. Now, from a human perspective, because we're having a low frequency incarnation and we're temporarily merged within a physical vehicle, we're obsessed with what it is that is perceivable through our five senses, and therefore some technology that we've invented that can see genetics and hereditary traits. But remember, that technology has to be interpreted through our five physical senses as well. So we're constantly limiting ourselves. Genes and genetics are really nothing. What we have to do is to go to these higher frequencies and specific frequencies that contain the energetic templates. So think of a blueprint for a building. Okay, what people look at as genes or genetics is still another blueprint from a blueprint from a blueprint from another blueprint. In fact, there's about 7 different layers, which correspond to the 7 chakras. So really what we want to start doing, and this is probably also where this is also very different in terms of a basic understanding that's been passed down for a very long time, is the specificities about the energetic templates, and to be able to perceive these things, and not only perceive them, but actually understand them. So what we want to do is we want to raise our frequency so we go to where the blueprints exist. And that's really how you unlock it. It's the sentience, or what you really are. By accessing more of yourself, that's what turns on or changes our DNA. That's what actually does it. It's not by focusing on the body, because the DNA is still a blueprint, step down, frequential interpretation of these higher frequency energetic templates.
Here is a question from somebody calling themselves CC Writer, who says, through mindfulness, I have seen that I have no control over my thoughts. They just appear. If thinking the correct thoughts is required in Mr. Spina's protocol, how do you address this hurdle?
Yeah, no, it is not thinking the correct thoughts. Actually, what I talk about is no thought. So what we want to do is go to before there's thinking. It's spiritual fiction that we heal ourselves through belief, through positive thinking. That is not how healing works. It just doesn't. Believing and thinking are low frequency. Okay, so if you're operating the low frequency, you actually can't heal yourself, because healing occurs at higher frequencies. So we have to learn how to control our energy, which is to be just present. Now, the reason why the thoughts keep occurring, because these are all identifications that are unresolved. So we have seen ourselves as this belief or this experience, or some identification. And so because these things are unresolved, when you try to quote unquote meditate, these are the things that come up. So these are the misperceptions, misunderstandings, and misidentifications that have to essentially be let go of. The mind wants to figure everything out, but the intellect doesn't authentically know anything. It just memorizes. So really what you want to do is learn how to release these things, not give them any sort of attention. And if you don't give them any attention, they'll simply just float away. And the healing starts actually when we're in the no thought state. The self, as I like to say, is meditation itself. And this is how healing begins. It's the return to what is original to you. Healing has nothing to do with thinking or believing or emotionalizing. It actually starts to occur before those things.
Well, here's a follow-up question then from me, because we all experience at some time at night while we're asleep, deep dreamless sleep, which is a no-thought state of consciousness. So it would seem that what you're suggesting is that is a state conducive to healing.
Yeah, Jeff, exactly. I mean, I think plenty of doctors talk about that, the parasympathetic state, which is where all the healing starts to occur. And that's actually when we're unconscious, when we're sleeping. And the reason why it only occurs then is because it's the only time the ego mind identity is not running. So this is also another maybe understanding that takes things further with the ascended frequencies healing technique. We want to bring, so to speak, the parasympathetic state into our waking state. So in other words, we need to be present, we need to be calm. So you can think of that, how that relates to when we're quote unquote asleep. Now, remember, consciousness doesn't turn itself off. Okay, what we call sort of dreamless sleep, the reason why we don't recall it is because our consciousness is doing things that don't relate to being human whatsoever. And in a lot of ways, it would give away the game as to what is really going on. If we were awake when we went to sleep, things would be very difficult for people. Now, there is a state of consciousness, or a state of, or maybe we could say a level of consciousness, that when we go to sleep, we can actually make the determination that we're going to stay awake, that the consciousness will continue to perceive even while the body is at rest. And so this is something very interesting that maybe we could talk about some other time for sure. But we want to look at the parasympathetic state, which is where all cell repair, growth hormone, T cells, this is when the body starts to repair itself. And it only does it when we're asleep, because that's when the ego mind identity is actually turned off. It's not active.
So what you're saying then is that a dreamless sleep is not exactly the same as the parasympathetic state. Right.
And in fact, I would say that we never really, the consciousness doesn't turn off. I know we don't recollect, we wake up and we have no idea what just happened for the last 6 or 8 hours. But what would be revealed to our human experience if we were aware and awake during the dream state? We would learn so much. We would learn more in one night than we do in an entire lifetime of trying to study things.
So I infer from what you just said that you have that awareness.
Yeah. There is a way, a specific protocol. Once you have, we'll say, resolved a lot of the misperceptions, misunderstandings, and misidentifications, the mind remains eternally clear, right? There is sort of a state of perpetual meditation, which is just to always be present. The beingness is now online, and then it's simply the beingness into the doingness. Now, this can and does apply even to when the human mind turns itself off, because you're not the human mind. You're what exists before that, and there is a way to stay awake through sleep.
And in fact, when you earlier talked about the need to remain vigilant yourself so that you don't regress back into some of these medical conditions to which I guess you're still vulnerable, that sort of implies a kind of continual vigilant state.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. So I think there's a big misunderstanding and misperception about maybe even what like enlightenment actually is. It's a moment to moment thing. Our existence is moment to moment to moment. It's not some universal destination either. One man's enlightenment is not the same as another, and that has to do with, that's a whole nother conversation. But it is a moment to moment thing, absolutely. And it's not, okay, you've now experienced this bliss state or this communion with the higher self, or being able to intelligently and directly interact with God. But then there's the next moment. So I think there's a Buddhist saying something like, Tuesday, take out the garbage. Wednesday, reach enlightenment. Thursday, take out the garbage. Something along those lines. But this speaks to what I'm talking about. It's moment to moment to moment. And this is what makes coming here into the low frequency so challenging, which also lets us evolve. It's such a great rate because it is so challenging moment to moment to moment.
Here's a question from Celia. She asks, have you ever thought of applying your method to children who are born with permanent illnesses? And if so, has it been any different than helping adults?
Oh, I would love to do that. I've worked with a couple of children that were diagnosed as autistic. Now, autism is not, I have a completely different, like most things, I have a completely different understanding of what autism is. So these are more advanced souls that are coming in and are operating in a higher frequency way. And they had the expectation that humanity would be operating in a higher frequency way, and we're not. And so they get frustrated very quickly. They get angry very quickly. They don't like to be touched because they're less and less of the physical. So there's a lot to learn from children that are diagnosed as autistic. It's not a mental illness. If anything, they're actually more advanced, and we're trying to dumb them down through medication and make them, quote unquote, more like us. I have a different understanding of mental illness and also the causes of mental illness. Other than autism, I'm trying to think with children that I've worked with. I've definitely worked with children that have extreme fears about things, for sure. Help them to get over their nighttime panics that they have. I've worked with kids that have had phobias. It works with everything. The truth is the truth, and it applies to everything. And these truths that I'm talking about apply far beyond just health as well.
Okay, here's a question from Ivy Velasquez. If you're hurting in a bad situation and can't get out fast enough to start healing, what can I do? Do you believe crying is cleansing? Because in the book you mentioned for people not to cry anymore.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting question. Okay. If we feel that there's an emotion that we need to release, there's nothing wrong, quote unquote, wrong about releasing an emotion. There's nothing, quote unquote, right about not releasing it either. It's just what feels that needs to be done in the moment. If we're talking about pain, if the question is specifically about pain, there's one thing that I used to do all the time, and I teach this with everyone, is that when you get a jolt of pain, okay, and I know exactly what this feels like, our natural reaction is to brace ourselves, okay, to tense up. Now, that creates resistance, which makes the pain worse, okay? So think of it as a challenge. When pain comes in, what you actually want to do is surrender. You actually want to relax. You don't want to tense up. Now, as you relax, the other thing I would do is I used to imagine myself as completely hollow. So think of a balloon. Just nothing in it, okay? No bones, no blood, no ligaments, no nothing, right? Okay, so I would relax, even though the pain just kicked in. And then I would imagine myself as hollow. Then I would imagine what it feels like to be completely hollow. I would imagine it tangibly. When you imagine and you feel tangibly what it's like to be hollow, the pain just disappears. There's no way for anything to hurt if you actually tangibly feel like there's nothing inside you. Everything is your higher mind and everything is your imagination. And we have to start working in this way. Everything is so prescribed about what is possible and what is not possible. Imagination trumps everything. Everything comes from imagination. And your higher mind is pure imagination. It's the higher mind of God. So when we start to work with this way, it doesn't matter what's going on. If pain is bothering you, and I get it, and I'm sorry, if pain is bothering you, don't tense up. That makes it worse. relax, surrender, breathe, imagine that you're totally hollow, and imagine what it feels like to be totally hollow, and watch what happens with the pain.
And in your case, as I recall from our previous discussion, you experienced, I think, what you described as unimaginable pain.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt there were moments where if I would have let myself, I would have just started screaming at the top of my lungs. I mean, I couldn't believe the levels of pain. But what was helpful was this, deep level of detachment. And so I would literally be the sentience or the awareness of my body completely freaking out. And that's how I used to say it. You say, wow, my body is totally freaking out with pain. And even the healing process itself, reawakening all those nerves is not pleasurable. So I had to learn how to work with deep levels of pain and to be completely detached from that pain, and then to do these things that I'm talking about imagining yourself being hollow, because energy, even scientists today say that what's solid is 99.999999% empty space. It is. It is. So if you tangibly start to feel what that's like, it just becomes so difficult to be racked with pain.
Here's a question from Rafael Reyes, who says, can you heal yourself from a brain injury?
Can you heal yourself from a brain injury? I'm gonna ask that question. Yeah, you can heal yourself from a brain injury. The answer is you can heal yourself of anything. That's the answer. You can heal yourself of anything. Now, what starts to come into play is the soul wants to have certain experiences. That's how the soul learns about itself. So sometimes the point is to have that experience and to work with it. And then to learn to work at our highest potential, which is to be able to put ourselves back together, which is really an aspect of self-mastery, to put the body back together, even though we're not the body. But can you heal yourself of a brain injury? It would take extraordinary effort and dedication. I don't think anything unlike what I had to do for myself took extraordinary effort and dedication. But I don't. When I look at things from a higher consciousness perspective, I can't find limitations. I don't see them. Now, when I look with the lower consciousness, and then we're rife with limitations. I mean, that's all that's here. That's impossible. That's impossible. That's impossible. When the higher mind looks, it just sees pure potential. So I don't see why anyone can't heal themselves of anything if they apply true dedication, true discipline, and they're operating with themselves properly. And yes.
We haven't reviewed it, but I remember we haven't reviewed it today. In our previous conversation, we talked about the enormous mental focus that you had to bring to bear in order to do this healing. For example, as I recall, you cut off communication with all of your friends who wanted to reach out to you in the hospital and see how you were doing. You had to devote literally 100% of your mental energy to accomplish this healing. And so for people who talk about New Age nonsense as if this is some sort of an easy thing, all you have to do is make a wish and you're going to feel better, they have a misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jeff. This is not, oh, I'm all better. Oh, quite the opposite. Okay, quite the opposite. And I'm not sure if I shared this with the last time that we spoke. The Chinese medicine expert who was in who would visit me in the house, who wrote the foreword for the book, because he witnessed it. He says, I have to write about this because this is extraordinary. When I was putting my body through absolute torture so I could walk again, he came over one time and he was examining me, and he's quite skilled. He's been doing it for almost 30 years, very skilled. And as he touched my ribs, he's like, RJ, listen, the way that you're pushing yourself, okay, you're gonna snap your entire rib cage if you keep pushing yourself like this. Do you understand me? You're gonna snap your rib cage. Now, my answer to that was, I'm willing to break everything in order to put it back together properly. Now, I share this so people can understand the mindset of total victory. Sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes that is what it takes. This is not snap your fingers. This is through extraordinary discipline. Think of a yogic master sitting in Tibet, if you will, in a constant state of meditation using his higher mind, because it's exactly that. It's exactly that. These are the teachings that I remembered to do in order to put my body back together. And it takes extraordinary discipline, and it takes extraordinary dedication. And the reward is to learn how to work with yourself in that way. The reward is, oh, now I can walk, or that's not really the reward. The reward is to learn to work with yourself in a much higher state, in a much more holistic state. That's the true reward.
I have a question here from Star Snake, and Star Snake asks, how did you get the pain again? And I think he's or she is referring to when you said you couldn't even feel anything below the chest at all, and then it became filled with pain. So what was that process like?
Well, as the healing started to take place, and like I said, there was nothing for 17 days at all. The pain initially was the process of getting sick and becoming paralyzed. The pain was absolutely extraordinary. Then there's, quote unquote, nothing except this dull, deep ache throughout my back, but nothing specific. Then as I started to work with the healing technique and bring energy back through the spine and be able to reanimate all these organs and everything, it's kind of like sending an electric current through. It's electricity, and all those nerves, all those neurons were highly damaged. I mean, they were destroyed, essentially. So that level of pain was in a lot of ways worse than what it was leading up to getting paralyzed. Putting myself back together, the pain was absolutely extraordinary. And I think I have a video of me, my body convulsing. I didn't put it up there because it's a little disturbing, but it's my body literally convulsing after doing one of the healing techniques on myself to bring the energy back into my body. My body was literally, my legs were shaking, everything was shaking. The pain was absolutely extraordinary. The only thing I can tell you to do, detach from it. You're not the body. You're not the body. So you don't have to get carried away with it. Detachment is the key. Human beings have to learn detachment from thoughts, emotions, body, and bodily sensations.
Here's a question from Charlie Buckholtz, who says, RJ, thank you so much. Your experience seems so singular. Have you met others who've described having experiences parallel to your own?
Is this in reference to healing, or is this in reference to the cosmic consciousness?
Well, I'm under the impression that Charlie is really referring to both, because the next question is, are there other, quote, ascended masters that you have met or know of?
Okay, so I would say in this timeline, I have not met anyone who has experienced this level of healing. There might be. I haven't met anyone. I haven't heard of it. So it's probably fairly unique. Have I met ascended masters in this lifetime? If you're referring to incarnate, yes. I'm very close to an ascended master who is incarnate. Ascended masters keep incarnating, contrary to popular spiritual fiction, or however you want to say it. Most of that stuff is completely inaccurate. Ascended masters continue to incarnate. They have a role to play here. That's a whole nother conversation that I could talk about for endlessly. But yeah, there are, I can tell you for a fact, there are 5 incarnate ascended masters right now. 2 of them know exactly who and what they are. The other 3 have not completely woken up. And I don't want to be any more specific than that.
Okay, how tantalizing. Well, we plan to have several more conversations on the New Thinking Aloud channel. We even have the dates in the calendar. So we'll be exploring some of these topics in future New Thinking Aloud programs. Here's an interesting question from the Usual Suspects Bluegrass Band. It's interesting. On YouTube, people get to choose these names. And he or she asks, could it be possible to heal or help another person who is not able to do it themselves?
Oh, yeah.
Whoop, hold on. Oh, shit. No. I muted you by accident, and now you have to unmute yourself.
I think I just did.
There. Okay. It's my fault.
No worries. No worries. Technology, right?
Yeah.
By the way, if we didn't have this technology, we would all be telepathic by now. And that's something else we can talk about at some point. Okay. Sometimes technology slows down the evolution of consciousness. Okay. The question was, I'm sorry, could someone repeat the question, Jeff? What was the question again?
Could it be possible to heal or help another person who is not able to do it for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that I do for a lot of people. My real goal is to teach people how to do this for themselves and not me do healing work on everybody. But yes, I do healing work on people that are not able to work with themselves in this way yet. So absolutely. What I want us to really understand about that, okay, is that the healer is within. Okay, no one really heals anybody else, and let me explain this. Okay, so the self, okay, what we really are, okay, is whole and complete. It's not lacking anything. The human condition is just a program of limitations, but that's not what we are. The self, the sentience, the soul, whatever word you want to use, is literally a direct whole fractal of God. It's not lacking anything. So it's when we start to access this directly and start to quote unquote live this way, as this way, for this way, by this way, it is such a supreme vibration that the body literally starts to heal itself. Now, what has become disharmonious or what we've become disconnected to through that process of reconnecting with the self, we reclaim it. We reclaim our body of energy. And sometimes what we reclaim is part of the physical body. By reclaiming it, the disharmony is gone. So the healer is within. Now, what a true healer, okay, and from my perspective, there's very few true healers because a true healer will have healed themselves on every level. That's what a healer is, from my perspective. Now, what a true healer can do is they can create such a wide space for the person to reclaim themselves. So think of almost just like clearing things out, because that, in a lot of ways, that is literally what I do. The things that have gotten embedded in the energetic body as well as the physical body. So you kind of move those things or clear them out. And then the person, the patient, the client, whatever word you want to use, can then reclaim their body of energy. They can then reclaim their physical body with their presence. So that's what a real healer does. A real healer should have healed themselves on every single level. And now we're starting to understand how few real healers that actually exist, right? But the healer is truly within, because no matter what a real healer does, that person then has to reclaim themselves. They have to reclaim their body of energy. They have to reclaim their body. And that's when healing actually takes place, if that makes sense.
Karen Schultz writes that years ago, she had an OBE, out of body experience, where she was conscious, but her body was asleep. She said, trying to wake up was the most exhausting experience she has ever had, as she was fighting herself. And she wants to know if you've ever had that experience.
Well, out of body, yeah. I mean, literally every day. So as I said, something I've been doing as a child. It's our natural state. We're not the body. So yes, so out of body experiences almost all the time, I guess we could say. Now, fighting myself, No. The reason why you were fighting is because you weren't fully back into the body yet. So you didn't have complete control over the vehicle. So if you're not totally back in, you can't animate the body, right? So when the consciousness, which is what animates the body, right, or gives the directive, I should say, to animate the body, is not fully back in the body, we're going to have a hell of a time getting the body to do anything because that which directs it is now outside of it. So you have to sort of fully re-immerse yourself back into the physical vehicle, and then you command the energy that you've been given to animate the body. But if the consciousness is outside of the body and you haven't fully reintegrated in, yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible to move the body, to animate it.
That was a very interesting answer. Rob Lim asks, will your method use for anti-aging effect?
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna write about that. Yeah. There's absolute, yes. There's a way to look like you're 40 forever. There is a way to do that. Um, it has to do with you being able to renew yourself. And again, this has to do with a meditative state. It has to do with detachment from the human condition. It has to do, let me give an analogy. Okay. Think of a submarine. Okay. Their design is incredible. How they run is just absolutely mind-boggling. They're just absolutely amazing. And they operate miles deep, in the ocean, and they run flawlessly. It's absolutely amazing. Okay. We are the same way. Okay. When we don't allow anything in, and I mean identification, we work the exact same way like a submarine. In fact, our design is far exceeds a submarine. And a submarine runs best when it doesn't take anything in from its environment. In fact, as soon as it takes anything in from its environment, water, it starts to break down. It starts to fall apart, and it actually sinks. Okay. So think of yourself the same way. Okay. Now the body is attuned to the local environment. Okay, the frequencies that are part of the physical universe, and that's what the chakras are feeding. Even though I know we can't see this, but we can see this. So the body is attuned to this environment. It's getting everything it needs to the chakras on its own. Once you start identifying with things here, okay, you're now bringing in water into the submarine. And as soon as you start to bring in free radicals that don't belong there, the body starts to break down. It starts to not run as well. Aging is part of that. It's part of that. It's a higher level understanding of what it is that we're talking about. And it has to do with maintaining a certain connection to yourself all the time and non-identification with the physical body, and therefore non-identification with anything here. So the analogy, hopefully, that is helpful, is to think of the submarine, how it works perfectly and can do anything in a completely foreign and hostile environment, miles deep below the ocean. And it's supreme. But as soon as it takes anything in from the environment, it falls apart. Start working with yourself that way. You are now operating in a higher frequency way. Aging has to do with identification with the low frequency. If you tangibly know what you are and you tangibly continually operate in a high frequency way, the body is going to reflect that. Hence, aging can greatly slow down. You can almost put aging on pause when you do it correctly.
Well, I know in the famous book by Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, he talks about a spiritual master he refers to as Babaji, who he claims has been alive in the physical body for, I don't know, over 2,000 years. And there are several books out by contemporary individuals who claim that they've met this Babaji, that he can materialize and dematerialize, and they've actually seen him. So what you seem to be saying is that the old conundrum that death is inevitable, like taxes, is not necessarily true.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's part of the limitation program that we give ourselves over to, even when we're mapping out the reincarnation process. So once we have awakened to a certain level of consciousness, or cosmic consciousness, if you will, we no longer write those things into our life plan because they just don't belong there. Because it's kind of like graduating 6th grade. You don't need to keep giving yourself the same problems that you had in 6th grade. You've moved past it. Life and death are concepts. They're just concepts. And higher consciousness transcends intellectualism. It transcends concepts. Now, Babaji, okay, from my direct understanding, is that he is the most evolved and advanced being that has ever walked the earth. And in fact, Babaji is the master of masters. All ascended masters eventually work with and are taught by Babaji. Babaji can materialize and dematerialize at will. This is true, authentic self-mastery at the highest levels. And beings like Yogananda, Christ, Buddha, Saint Germain, they have all studied with Babaji. They have all studied with Babaji. And I'm going to be teaching a course starting in February about self-mastery. And I'm going to talk a lot about the different levels of self-realization. I'm going to talk a lot about the true ascended masters, where they come from, what their role is, and why they continue to incarnate. But yes, we can, at the supreme high levels, we can transcend life and death without a doubt. We can almost completely stop the aging process. But again, we have to leave behind all the conditioning. We have to leave behind the human condition even while having the human experience. So this is all higher consciousness. And to be able to do these kind of things, to me, this is well beyond enlightenment. And this is something I'm going to talk about in the future. There are many, many things beyond enlightenment, and where Babaji operates and where some of those other beings that I was just talking about, Christ, Buddha, Yogananda, Saint Germain, I can tell you for a fact, those beings operate well beyond enlightenment.
Fascinating. I'm looking forward to our discussions in the future about these. Here's a interesting question from Space Cadet Lottie. It's really two questions. The first one, I think we already know the answer, and which is to ask you, how can we heal from parasites? Which is probably an answer similar to the ones you've already given. But the follow-up question, which really pertains to you as well as to Space Cadet Lottie and maybe all of our viewers, is there a spiritual reason we suffer certain conditions?
Oh, okay. By the way, those are good questions, and the answer is the same. Okay, so the parasite is the ego-mind identity. Okay, we have to start to understand this, and this again might be where the ascended frequencies healing technique is taking things to another level. All disharmony comes from disharmonious thought patterns, and all thought is in context to an identification. You can't think without first having an identification, and the conglomerate of your identifications is your ego-mind identity. Okay, so here's another analogy with that. We watch a movie. We see the characters in a movie. We know those characters aren't real, right? Okay, neither is yours. Neither is yours. Okay? All disharmony and disease comes from this lack of authentic truth. Okay? When we are not in harmony with ourselves, that means the ego-mind identity has taken control. Sickness and disease are subsets or sub-programs of the massive limitation program that we run as the ego-mind identity. So all of it comes from what we do to ourselves through identification with human and identification with belief, concepts, ideologies, and bodily experiences. None of it is actually you. The body was not designed to take direction from the mental body. The body was designed to take direction from the cosmic body, from the causal body. In fact, it's perfectly designed to take direction from the causal body, from the cosmic body. It cannot handle, nor was it designed to take direction from the mental body. So once we start to work with it, in the first part of the book, that's all I talk about in people that have read the book, ego, mind, identity, EMI. Yes, because it's the only obstacle that exists. It is the only obstacle that exists. And that character is just as phony and fake as a character in a movie. Now, when we start to have the tangible recognition of these things, healing begins. Healing starts to begin just by doing that. I hope I answered both part of those questions, but was there something more specific, Jeff, with the second part?
No, I think I think you addressed it, but we've got several other questions coming in. They're going to kind of go at the same subject matter from different angles.
Sure.
For example, CJ writes, the theme of this reality is to build you up with an ego, and then the crucible destroys it. This is how you learn. It is the natural process. So I guess CJ is making a statement and would like you to comment.
Well, sure, yeah. So the ego mind identity is formed through incarnation. Okay, that's actually how it's formed. So we come from a much higher frequency and much higher dimension than where we are now. And make no mistake, we're not in the third dimension going into the fifth. Okay, we're in the third frequency going into the fourth frequency of the first full dimension. All physicality is within the first full dimension. People call it 3D going into 5D. It's not from my perspective and not from my tangible experience, that is not accurate. Okay, so the ego mind identity occurs through incarnation. So as we're coming down dimensionally and frequentially for incarnation, we're losing consciousness. Okay, we're losing the direct connection to what we really are and where we come from. And by the time we arrived here in the slowest, densest frequencies of existence itself, and we temporarily merged with this thing, we literally start to identify ourselves with this thing. It's kind of like when you get in your car thinking you are your car. Okay, so we temporarily merge with this. We immediately think we're the body because we've lost connection to everything. Through identification with the body, which is the foundation of the ego mind identity, we then create this egoic character. I'm a this, I'm a that, all these different beliefs, all these different identifications. So it is inevitable that the ego mind identity is formed. It's going to form through the incarnation. And there's no way, by the way, to 100% remove your ego mind identity. I don't care how evolved or pure or powerful the soul is. If you completely removed your entire ego mind identity, you wouldn't be able to be here. You would literally leave your body. Okay, so even at the highest levels, I promise you, the Christs, the Buddhas, and the Saint Germains, there's still a little bit of ego because there has to be, which is what keeps them here. Okay, now by recognizing all these identifications, right, of the ego mind identity, this is when we begin to transcend it. And then we are no longer operating at the behest of our ego mind identity. And now what's leading the incarnation is the causal body, is the cosmic consciousness. And that is the goal of every single incarnation, is self-realization. That's actually the goal of every incarnation. The goal of incarnation is to not have to do it again, not have to keep doing it over and over again. And hopefully when we start working with ourselves and each other in the way that I lay out in the first book, we're going to start to change the evolutionary cycle for the souls that are incarnating as human. And this is what I am obsessed with.
And here is a question from one Vuv1. Do you believe that illness is the door to higher consciousness?
Well, it's an interesting question. Is it the door? No, imagination is the door. Imagination is the door. Can we use illness? Sure. Suffering plays a very important role. It's supposed to teach us certain things. Absolutely. It's there for a reason. I mean, it is supposed to teach us humility, grace, courage. That's what it's for. So can it open the door to the higher consciousness? Absolutely. When we are suffering, we tend to sometimes hopefully go within. And when we go within, then this is when the higher consciousness reveals itself.
Christine Lindeback says, what about plant medicines like ayahuasca? Can they be helpful with regard to ascending the frequencies, or should they be avoided?
Oh, good question, Christine. And nice to see you, Christine. Not that I see you, but okay. So plant medicine, I feel, can be very, very helpful for people. Okay, but let me give my perspective on plant medicine and really any physical interface. Okay, so anytime you use a physical interface, whether it's ayahuasca, a tincture, an herb, a crystal, it doesn't matter. Okay, anytime you use a physical interface, you are limiting yourself, and you're limiting yourself by the energies associated with the physical interface. So in other words, you're giving yourself another limitation, and the limitation will be the energies associated with the physical interface. The only thing that is unlimited is your own higher mind. So ultimately, we only want to use our higher mind. The self is whole and complete. We don't need physical interfaces. Most of the physical interfaces simply give us permission to move past whatever it is that we're holding on to. Because we're taking the ayahuasca, because we're taking the antibiotic, because we're taking the pill, we're giving ourselves permission to move past whatever it is that we're going on. The higher mind is so powerful, we don't really understand that that's really what's going on. We think it's the ayahuasca, or we think it's the DMT, or we think it's the pot, or we think it's the whatever it is, right? It's not. You're giving yourself permission. And ultimately, we're going to learn that we don't need any physical interface, because then you're limiting yourself to the energies associated with the physical interface. Do they have some form of efficacy? Absolutely. Absolutely. Am I an advocate of them? Not really. If you want to use these kind of things, then you go for it. I can tell you for myself, the energies with those things, they're going to keep you certainly within the first full dimension. Okay, they're going to keep you there. In fact, they normally limit you to the astral realm, which is the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th frequencies. So your consciousness is not going to be able to go beyond the physical universe. Now, it'll seem completely different, because the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th frequencies is very different than where we are right now. But it's absolutely going to limit you in terms of being able to go well beyond those things. So ultimately, they're going to be a limitation. But in the beginning, for some people, they may be quite helpful.
And I've got a similar question from Rob Lim, who says these high frequencies can be mimicked by electronic, sound, magnetic, or even scalar technologies. And I know there are all sorts of electronic devices out there for various healing purposes. To bring this to impregnate a house, for example. Well, I don't know about that. But so Rob is asking about electronic means, which I guess the answer would be very similar to the plant medicine. But let's hear you say it.
Yes. So, okay. So my understanding is that healing frequencies you would not be able to hear them with your ear. So there's a bit of a misunderstanding about healing frequencies. Now, certain frequencies or tones, they are very relaxing. They're very soothing. There's no doubt about that. I like to listen to tones myself, right? They're absolutely soothing. They're absolutely relaxing. So in that sense, we could say that they're healing. But true healing frequencies are far beyond the human ear. You wouldn't be able to hear it at all. Okay, so again, it's kind of another physical interface. There's some help there. There's some limited efficacy within those things. If it brings you a sense of peace and calmness and you feel better, then that's wonderful. Then use it. Are we going to heal ourselves by listening to tones? It doesn't really work that way. The true healing frequencies are so high, we don't actually hear it. And for those that experience, so we have constant noise when we're human, and then when we meditate, we get the silence. But if you go much, much, much deeper within the meditation, you will start to hear the polyphonic symphony of existence itself. And those are the healing frequencies.
Okay, now it's a little past the top of the hour. We should let our viewers know we're going to continue until we reach the bottom of the hour, another 27 minutes from now. Several people have been concerned about the medical practitioners. People are expressing a concern that many times healers such as yourself, if you consider yourself a healer, and I'm not sure that that's quite correct, are concerned that people might avoid getting medical attention when they need it. And I suppose it's safe to say right at the outset, you worked with doctors and hospitals yourself quite extensively.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness I went to the hospital. No, it's actually quite the opposite. And maybe people are surprised about that. I really think a complete holistic approach is the best way to go. So of course I went to doctors. I had emergency surgery. If I didn't have that surgery, this incarnation would be over. There's no doubt about that. Now, I think what's really important to start to understand is if you're relying on your everyday health all the time to manage and treat a chronic illness where you're not getting better, I'd say you've absolutely experienced the limitation of Western medicine. You're not actually getting better, you're just staying sick. Okay. So we need to have a holistic approach. We need to be able to utilize Western medicine to help us, but we also need to go way beyond because Western medicine is very limited to the low frequencies. It has a very limited understanding. And if anyone thinks Western medicine doesn't have a limited understanding, I think they just want to lie to themselves. Okay. All disharmony comes from the higher frequencies through our ego mind identity. And all Western medicine does is treat the body. Now it can be very helpful without a doubt. And in fact, I would say once we'll use the word illness, has gotten so deeply embedded within the gross physical, you're going to have to use Western medicine to do something about it. Once it's that deeply embedded within the gross physical, you're going to need a gross physical instrument to go in there and get it out. Okay. So I don't disavow Western medicine at all. I just want people to realize that the inherent limitations when you're only dealing with the physical, because all disharmony doesn't originate in the physical. So we want to incorporate Western medicine and we want to start to incorporate these teachings and these understandings because once we start to work with the ego mind identity and we start to remove it, it's everything that's circulating here is what informs the body. Whatever conceptual reality we create for ourselves, the body has the tangible experience of that. So we have to start working on the other end of this by creating a highly expanded and higher state or conceptualized reality. The body has the tangible experience of that as well, and we can call that healing. So no, don't disregard doctors. Just realize that they're working with a severe set of limitation, but sometimes it's absolutely necessary to work with Western medicine.
Now, in your case, you were in the hospital and you were able to, because your condition was so severe, you were able to devote 100% of your energy, you're pretty close to that, to your own healing. Now, many people don't have that luxury. They're sick, but they have a family to be responsible for, and so on. Will your methods work well for people who are still embedded in life and can't give it 100% the way you did?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be efficacy. Just think of it. I'll just use an analogy. Think about working out. Okay, if you go to the gym every day, right, and you do it for 90 minutes, some people do it twice a day, right? The results are immediate and they're extraordinary because of all the energy and dedication that's going. So if you work out every single day, you can tell you're getting in better shape. You don't work out every day, you can still get into better shape. It's just not quite the same and takes longer. Same understanding. It's the exact same thing. I would just ask people, what is the priority, right? What is, if you don't have your health, it's true, you don't have nothing. This incarnation won't last much longer in certain conditions if the health is that compromised. So, and what's the thing with when you're on a plane, they always tell you when the oxygen mask drops down, put yours on first. Okay. We have to work on ourselves. We have to be there for ourselves first. And as strange as this sounds, it's the ego mind identity that makes us believe that we have to operate in another way. It's actually your conditioned mind about what you think is caring and all these kind of things about I'm willing to sacrifice myself and not work on myself because I have to do this. That is your conditioned mind. Because an awakened mind would never operate that way. It would never think that way. It would prioritize its own well-being first, because once you have your own well-being, that's what you'll be able to share with other people. So that's something for people to think about. It's the ego mind identity that has programmed you to sacrifice yourself, even though you're suffering, and not give yourself what it is that you need because you've deemed other responsibilities to exceed that. That is actually not the true nature of things.
Here's a very interesting question from Ismail Ibrahim, who asks, what about mental illness? If you're having a mental health problem, how do you heal yourself from that?
The exact same protocols and understandings. They work the same way. If we're talking about anxiety or stress or depression, I did a whole video on that, by the way, for those that sign up for my newsletter. I do videos all the time. I describe exactly what that is and how that works. So that has to do with an overabundance of energy in the mental body and or the emotional body. So if we have anxiety, constant stress, or what we call mental illness, that's because the energy doesn't stop swirling within the head. If we're suffering from depression, that's because there's an overabundance of stagnant energy that is sitting in the emotional body. So healing, it doesn't matter what the problem is. It's irrelevant, okay? Because they're all subsets of your ego mind identity. When you start to work with your energy properly and you remove it out of the mental body and out of the emotional body, you're simply present. There's no way to think and emote when there's no energy up here and there's no energy in the emotional body. Anxiety, stress, and depression, it stops. This is the whole part of this new understanding of what to do with ourselves. It doesn't matter what the illness is. When we work with the self directly, it transcends anything that's going on with the body mind.
Richard Downs Jr. asks, does evil exist?
No. So that is a human perspective, right? You could just, if you want to use the word evil, you can just think of it as an alternative way of being. Okay, it's all God. Everything here is God. Okay, and God welcomes all experience. Now, what we call evil, from my perspective, is a low frequency way of operating. That's, I feel, a much more accurate way of understanding it. It's a low frequency way of operating. And we could think of kindness and compassion and wisdom as a high frequency way of operating. So there's no such thing as actual evil. There's no such thing as actual demons. This is a completely human perspective, and often based upon some sort of religious dogma or doctrine. It has nothing to do with actual metaphysics. Nothing to do with actual metaphysics. So evil is simply an alternative way of being, but think of it as just operating in a very low frequency way.
We've had a few questions come in about money. People are concerned that you're charging for some of the services you offer, and how do you justify that? So maybe you could say a few things about the relationship between healing and money.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm not sure I need to actually justify to make a living. I'm not sure that actually needs justification. So that I'll say that about that. And the other thing is, it's a very interesting belief that people have adhered to, that authentic advanced beings should do everything for free, right? Well, I do have to eat. I do have to provide for my family. This is, by charging people, it allows me to help more people. And I think it's interesting, because if I charged absolutely no one for anything, I would have to go work somewhere, and then I'd be helping no one. So it's an interesting belief that beings should be doing this for free. Now, I'm going to add one more thing to that. It is not this incarnation of RJ where I'm going to go live in a cave or live in Tibet or wherever. And I feel that calling. Believe me when I tell you that. I feel that calling to do those kind of things. But this incarnation, I need to be working with people all the time. I need to be involved all the time. So that's the role that I'm playing as RJ. So I have to charge people. Otherwise, I can't support myself. I can't support my family. And it's just an odd belief that I shouldn't be able to support my family or charge people. It's sort of ridiculous. Not even sort of. It's ridiculous. If I left society and charged no one, I wouldn't even be able to participate. I wouldn't be helping people if I didn't participate in society. So this is why I choose to charge people. It's because I choose to operate, and I choose to support myself and my family.
Yeah. It might be useful to point out that nobody is being charged for participating right now in this dialogue.
Yeah. It's, if you're turned off by the fact that I need to support myself, then that's okay. You're allowed to. I also do tons of things on my website, and videos and newsletters and articles. I just wrote a book that's what, $10, $15. So I feel like there's a really good balance there. If you want to work directly with me, of course I have to charge.
It's a question that comes up all the time for many of the people I interview, whether they're doing remote viewing or healing or all sorts of other activities that are related to spiritual reality. Anita G. is going back to the question of mental illness. She notes you address depression and stress, but what about schizophrenia and psychosis?
Yeah, okay. So this is a very interesting topic. So that I'm going to have to allow me to ramble here for a minute, Jeffrey, which I do all the time anyway, right? Okay. So these kind of things, schizophrenia, bipolarism, certain mental illnesses I'm going to say some things that are very controversial. A lot of these things have to do with multiple souls within the body. They have to do with walk-ins. If people don't know what a walk-in is, I'll explain that in a second. But it also has to do with multiple souls within a body. So the analogy is if you're going to go to the store and you're going to go pick up two of your friends, right? And you're driving and you go pick them up and you're driving to the store. Well, it's kind of understood that they're going to sit in the back and not try to drive. I would think, right? They're going to just sit in the back and enjoy the ride. Okay. The same thing occurs with an incarnation. Okay. Sometimes there literally is an agreement, and it's more common than people realize. There's an agreement where there's going to be multiple souls within the body. Okay. Now, normally the agreement is that a couple of them are going to sit in the back seat the whole time and just enjoy the ride. So they're going to get the human experience from the back seat, so to speak, as an analogy. Okay. But this realm is so intoxicating. Okay. A lot of times the souls that are supposed to be sitting in the back seat want to grab the wheel and they want to drive, right? Or if they see that the driver is not paying attention enough to their liking, they'll reach forward and grab the wheel. So a lot of our mental illness, bipolarism, is almost every time I've encountered anyone, it's because there's multiple souls going on. They're fighting over who gets to drive. So now these things can be worked with. Absolutely. And by the way, this was taken out of my first book. They're like, this is too controversial. So I said, oh, okay. So I am going to teach and talk about more about what I'm talking about. But we have to start to understand way beyond the five senses and way beyond the intellect as to what's really going on here. It is not what people think it is. Schizophrenia, bipolarism, even tremendous mood swings, right? If there's this huge mood swing, that's a clear indication of a whole nother soul has just sort of taken control. There's cases, documented cases as well. I can't think of the name of the doctor that did this, but anyway, the doctor was treating a person that had multiple personalities. This doctor went as far as to do blood work on each one of the multiple personalities when they would show up. Some of the souls that were showing up, or the multiple personalities, some of them had completely different blood work. One of them was diabetic. One of them had all these, and then when that soul leaves and another soul comes in, you did the blood work's completely different. So again, and this speaks to the ego, mind, identity and all this. So mental illness is not understood at all. Autism is not understood at all, but all of these things can be worked with, but they can only be worked with using our higher mind, because they're well beyond the five senses and the intellect.
There's a question that came in earlier from Sam S. Sam As, who apparently he's tried to get through to you by email and through your website, I assume, and hasn't gotten any response. So he wants them. Do you respond to emails? If people want to contact you, what's the best way?
Yeah, just rj@ascendthefrequencies.com. And yes, I do. People know I actually do respond to emails. Yeah, just rj@ascendthefrequencies.com.
Because this person is claiming that you never answer personal emails.
Quite the opposite. In fact, I'm sure there's people that are on this broadcast right now that have actually responded to their emails.
And now I know you and I have had some interaction earlier. You've developed an app. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Jeff, I'm absolutely thrilled about this. So it's Supercharged Self-Healing mobile app online course. So myself and my team have dedicated at least 5 months and the team is all over the world: India, Mexico, the Canary Islands, UK, India, Australia. I've had people working on this app. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Everything that you need for self-healing and self-realization is literally on your phone. So it takes all of the teachings in the book, Supercharged Self-Healing, and now you'll have access to it 24/7. There's whiteboard animations I've had done, 3D modeling that captures some of the things that I'm able to see through my own higher consciousness. You're now going to be able to see it. There's computer graphics, PowerPoints. There's 25 hours of video. The whole thing is narrated by me. It's absolutely revolutionary. I could not be more excited about it. So please, if you're interested in any of the things that I'm talking about, go to my website. I did a 2-hour webinar talking about it. It's a free training, and then I give an insider's look into the app. It's absolutely revolutionary. It'll help you in ways that you can't imagine. And now, instead of having your phone distract you, you can have everything that you need on your phone for your own self-healing and self-realization.
And your website again, let's give that out.
Sure. It's ascendthefrequencies.com, ascendthefrequencies.com.
Okay. Now, it's probably worth mentioning that in the background, and this often happens when we do live streams, there are people who don't share the point of view of me or the guests, and sometimes you could think of them as trolls, or maybe they're unhappy people, or simply honest skeptics. It's hard to say, but some people think that all of this discussion is absolutely crazy and dangerous. And I know you don't feel any responsibility for what these people think, but I wonder if you want to address that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. Okay. So as a soul evolves, okay, it's going to naturally have an inclination towards more and more and more of the metaphysical or less tangible, because it's getting more and more attuned with itself, and it's leaving behind the physical nature of its existence, even while it's incarnate. It's kind of like it's graduating, if that makes sense, graduating high school. Okay. There are many souls that are smack dab in the middle of their evolutionary process. And so any kind of spirituality or higher consciousness, wisdom, or metaphysics, because it's outside of their 5 physical senses and their intellect, they just think it's insane. And that's okay. It's totally okay. That's exactly where they're at. And that's probably where they should be at. Okay. But eventually everyone comes to seek these things out. As the consciousness, as the soul is evolving through its own evolutionary cycle, they're more and more and more drawn to, we'll use the word spirituality or wisdom or metaphysics. It's a natural cycle. And those that aren't paid trolls to just kind of do this because they're literally paid to do this, but there are some people that are just not ready. I have family members that are just like, well, RJ is really being who he is, but they're like, I have no interest in this. It's fine that you're into it, you help people, and that's great. But I have no interest in this. It's not my reality. It's not my world. It's totally okay. There's plenty of room for everybody. Okay. The self is so expansive and so huge that there's room for every opinion and everyone all the time. So it's okay if people think this is crazy. Other people have said, this is what I've been looking for my entire life. Now I'm really here for them because they're ready to work with themselves in this way. And the naysayers who think this is crazy, I promise you, eventually, they're going to want this like a starving man needs food. They're just not ready for it yet. So of course they just dismiss it. That's okay.
Well, we have just over 5 minutes, RJ. It's worth letting our viewers know that on the New Thinking Aloud channel, we plan at least another 4 or 5 more interviews to talk about different metaphysical topics. We offer a free newsletter. People can sign up for that. It's a weekly newsletter by going to the New Thinking Aloud Foundation, which is newthinkingaloud.org. That's New Thinking Aloud is ALLOWED for people who don't know. But before we close, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers?
I would say, yeah, judgment. Okay, take a look at judgment. So I would say all judgment is the ego mind identity, and you're not your ego mind identity. It is actually your conditioning. And so allowing everyone to have the experience that they have says everything about you. And to try to deny other people's experiences because they don't see things the way you do, or they're not behaving the way that you do, or they haven't realized their own cosmic consciousness, and to look down upon them, or just the opposite, right? This is just foolish. Everyone gets to evolve in their own way and in their own time. And for those that are not ready to work with themselves in the way that I talk about, that's totally okay. That doesn't negate the fact that it's actually occurring. That doesn't negate the fact that it's true. That doesn't negate the fact that this is higher consciousness metaphysics. Allow everyone to experience life in their own way and in their own time. And your own judgment is just a reflection of your self-judgment, of your own identifications. And so that's really what we can learn. It's not so much about casting judgment upon someone else, whether you think that they're just out of their mind or you just think that they're very closed-minded. Just try not to have judgment about anybody, and know that everyone is evolving in their own way and in their own time. And there's such a gradient that occurs between souls that are just getting into the evolutionary cycle to souls that don't even need to be here at all, that simply incarnate to teach and to help. The gradient is so gigantic. The best thing to do is just to sit back and take it in. And what resonates, work with it. What doesn't resonate, just leave it alone. But to condemn it is just foolish, one way or the other.
Well, what about, let me follow up with that, to condemn things that seem evil? Do you think that we should just accept, for example, war?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, what goes on right now is that we're being shown how not to be, essentially. The way that this world is run, the dictates of this world, we're getting a taste of how not to be. And first we have to exhaust how not to be before we get to how to be. And so we're kind of at these last almost thrashings of low frequency existence. And so we don't want to participate with it, right? We want to kind of view it from a distance. The only way to win is not to play, to not identify with what's going on and get caught up with it. If you don't identify and get caught up with it, it doesn't really touch you. And then you don't engage in it. You don't lower yourself. You don't drop yourself. And what happens is you'll simply just rise above it. And so right now we're seeing that there are still lots of people that like to operate in a low frequency way. There's lots of people that are so turned off by this, but these are souls that have gone past this. They kind of know these things, right? So the key is don't get involved, stay detached, and that will allow you to work in the way that you need to work. Even if there's total chaos going on, if you're detached, you're still going to be able to evolve in your own way and in your own time. And how I like to say it is, the only way to win is not to play, not to identify, not to get caught up, not to make a big deal about everything. And when you do that, it doesn't really affect you. And then you can go on with your progression, with the evolution of your consciousness. But as soon as you identify, if you're identifying with anything here, you're dropping yourself into the low frequencies. And really what you're doing is you're going to make it harder for yourself. So it's very challenging. And that's the whole challenge about incarnating into the lower frequencies. We're immersed in it. The body is attuned to it. So we're completely immersed. But that is the challenge, to detach from that level of immersion, to detach from that level of identification. And when you detach, your clarity and your wisdom, your inner wisdom will come online. And you will intuitively know what you want to get involved in and what you don't want to. But the only way to do that is through some level of detachment, which will give you clarity. And now you can operate in a way that's true to really who and what you are.
Well, RJ, this has been a delightful conversation. I'm so pleased to have this time once again with you. I'm really looking forward to our next time together, which will be, I think, in a couple of weeks from now. And as I mentioned earlier, we plan several more conversations on the New Thinking Aloud channel. We just have a minute to go. I want to thank all of our viewers. Also, in case you don't already know, this conversation, this live stream has been recorded, and if you missed the first part of it, the archive video will become available soon online. So once again, RJ, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It's my pleasure, and I'm absolutely looking forward to our next talk.
Very good. And I will stop the live stream. And there we go. The live stream